There you are. Good evening. I think I'll save some time by not going into a long introduction of my guest. If you don't know him on sight, then you obviously just arrived from some other planet. He was here last night in stocking feet, and it'll take too long to explain that. But to say that he's a splendid actor is to understate the case, and if you don't believe it, you can check that out these days in Camelot, if you're lucky enough to be in one of the cities that it tours in. Would you welcome again what I wish were a month-long conversation with Richard Burton? Last night you were talking about your father, and it was wonderful. And in passing, you mentioned that your mother died when you were 2. When your mother dies at that age, do you have any visual memory of her, or any kind of memory at all of?
No, none at all.
No.
And apparently, I was a real mother's boy. I went with her everywhere. I hung on to her. But there must have been. I think the shock must have been so great that when they told me she'd gone away and she wouldn't come back, which I don't remember being told, I never asked for her again. I completely, obviously, cut her out of my 2-year-old mind, and I have no recollection of her whatsoever.
I often wonder if under deep hypnosis, which can regress people practically to the womb, that memories of that age would come out. Supposedly they do. I don't know whether it's dangerous or not.
Yes, it must be sleeping there somewhere in some dormant part of the brain, but I'm not sure that I'd like to remember.
Were you sort of passed about then amongst sisters and other parts of your large family?
No. My mother died giving birth to her 13th child, and who is very much alive, my brother Graham. And he was 5 days old when she died, and she died actually of neglect. She was a very strong woman. Because she was 44 when she died, and she married my father when she was 16, and she had 13 children, and 2 died in infancy, and the others grew up.
Medical neglect?
Yes, she died of puerperal fever, which we used to call bed fever, which is simple neglect by a doctor, hygienic neglect. And so my eldest brother was married, and so my little brother, my 5-day-old brother, went to live with the eldest brother, and I went to live with my eldest sister. But I commuted as to her. She lived in another village called Tai Bath, and she was married to a miner, and I would spend the school week as to her, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, with my sister in the village of Tai Bath, and the weekends, or most weekends, back in Pontchartrain with my family, with my brothers and sisters.
So in that sense, you shuttled...
Shuttled back and forth, yes.
Was her name Sissy, the sister?
We called her Sis, yes. Her name was Cecilia, yes, actually. Yeah. But she's still very much alive. And her husband, who was like my adopted father in a sense, he died last year from the same disease as my brother, pneumoconiosis. And he also was 79. And I had a very happy childhood. As a matter of fact, I often think when I talk to other people and hear about their trials and tribulations with their parents and so on, that perhaps it's better to grow up without any, to be brought up avuncularly, or whatever the word is, to have aunts and uncles who spoil you and all compete to get your affection and your love. So I would wander around from family to family, and this one would slip me 6pence and another one 3pence and so on, and I'd grade them accordingly. And, so I had a really very happy childhood.
Were you above telling one that the other one had given you more? And
I would hint at it, yes. Yeah. I was, as one would do to one producer.
The later Burton was pre-shadowed in the...
Yes, he had his... as a matter of fact, I'd always had this happy knack of of acquiring money, even during the bad days of the Depression. I would sometimes earn as much as the minimum wage of a miner while I was at school. It meant a very full day, of course. I would get up when the miners went to work, or rather when they got up, before they went to work, which would be 4:30 or 5 in the morning. I still do get up at that time. And I would go up to the mountains with I remember I had a green sweater, especially for the occasion. And I'd go up to the mountains with a sack and a shovel and fill up the sack with horse manure and cow manure and take it back home. Then I would have to take a bath, of course, cold bath. We didn't have any heat because I was stinking. And, and put this dreaded green sweater away. And then I would go and wait for the express from London and wait for the daily newspapers to arrive. And then I delivered the newspapers. And then I would have breakfast. Then I would walk to school, the grammar school. And then I had an arrangement with the fish and chip shop and with my customers who had the newspapers. I would sell the dung for 6p a bucket to the various allotments. You know, people had allotments where they had their own gardens. I got 6p a bucket for the dung, and I was paid 1 shilling a week for delivering the newspapers, which in those days, I don't know what that would be in American money, I suppose about 25 cents. And then I would recollect some, not all, but a great many of the newspapers which I delivered during the week. I would recollect them on the Saturday and deliver them to a fish and chip shop. And on Saturday morning.
They wrap them in that, don't they, to sell them?
They used to, yes.
Yeah.
Not now. And they don't taste as good, you know, that without the printer's ink on them. I'm
can
sure,
tell.
I swear, I can tell the difference. Anyway, then I would, there was a thing that you turned with a handle which cleaned the potatoes in this fish and chip shop. And, but it couldn't get the eyes out. So I would eye the potatoes. And on a good week with tips from my customers and so on, I could earn as much as 30 or 35 shillings, which was the miner's minimum wage at that time.
Okay.
And so I always had a happy genius for getting money.
You realize what you've just done. You've given some critic a wonderful
Excuse.
dart. Yes, and now he can say, Burton revealed that he sold dung as a child, and now he's at it again.
Yes, indeed. I think they've one or two of them have said that without
without knowing,
without previous knowledge. Yes.
So I read somewhere that your first role, R-O-L-E, was.
What other spelling is
other
there?
kinds of role, R-O-L-L, I suppose, as in roll in the hay. I suppose that's what the dirty-minded laugh was about in the audience.
The first roll, yes.
First,
we'll assume it's R-O-L-E.
roll with the thing over the O. Was silent. That you, some production you were.
Oh yes, it was. That was as an amateur.
Cool
You
or
mean?
so- yeah.
Yes. I was about 14 and a half, I suppose. And I played the Bishop's Candlesticks. And do you know that play at all?
Oh no, I thought that was the part.
No. No, I've never been very good at playing candlesticks. Candlestick holders, yes, but...
Well, that's easy.
But anyway, it was called the Bishop's Candlesticks, and I played an escaped prisoner or something. I've really forgotten. And the whole thing was silent. And I won a prize, I remember. I don't know why I was doing it, actually, because I wasn't interested in acting at all. I suppose I was talked into it by somebody. I still am.
Still talked into it.
Still talked into it.
Can you remember, most actors can, I find, remember the time when they first felt that sense of power of being up on an elevated platform and having a command when they spoke of people seated below and out front and looking up admiringly, and that sometimes that moment is enough to commit them for a lifetime of thesping.
I don't remember that, but I do remember being it's a very complicated story, so I'll make it very short. When I was about 16, I acquired an entrance, a sort of exhibition, to go to Oxford University. But I got it too young. I was a year too young before going up. So one obviously had to do something for that year because nobody had too much money. And I thought, well, now I'll go down the mines for a year. And then this incredibly unique, I think, advertisement appeared in the newspapers. It could only have happened in wartime, which said that Emmy Williams was looking for a young man of 22 who could speak Welsh and who could act. And in the meantime, I'd been sort of made a ward of chancery by a man called Philip Burton, who's had a profound and lasting influence on my life. And I deeply love this man. He's still very much alive. He lives in Key West. And he's become an American.
So we didn't mention that you were born Richard Jenkins.
Yes, I was born Richard Jenkins. Yeah. And so I knew a great deal about the theatre. It had rubbed off on me from Philip Burton, who was a theatrical maniac, still is. Still gives lectures on the classics and so on, and is indeed one of the most knowledgeable men I know about Shakespeare particularly, and about that whole Elizabethan period. Anyway, so I knew something about the theatre, but I'd never acted except in that Bishop's Candlesticks and one other play, the name of which I've forgotten. So anyway, I thought, well, I'm big enough to be 22. And so Phil Burton and myself said, well, we'll have a go and see if I can get this part. So I got the part, went up to Cardiff, and I met Mr. Williams. And anyway, I got the part. And it was a nothing part. I mean, I hardly spoke at all, but I was on the stage all the time. And it took place in a pub. And I was the pub owner's son, and I was the potboy. You know, I served drinks to people all through the play. And I had one short speech in which I tried to explain to my little brother, who was the real star of the show, the story of Jekyll and Hyde, but very haltingly and with a very thick Welsh accent. And anyway, the newspapers came. I wasn't terribly aware of critics or anything in those days. And the newspapers came out and they all said, well, they hardly mentioned me. Or some would say, like, Richard Burton contributed effectively to the atmosphere or something like that. But it was, or they ignored me completely. Yeah. So I wasn't at all upset because I wasn't all that keen about acting. I thought it was quite interesting that people were willing to pay me £10 a week, which was 3 times more than the miner got. But the New Statesman, I believe it was, which is a weekly political magazine with a high reputation, had a critic for a time called James Redfern, who was a rather fine minor poet. And this particular notice said that the play was awful, and the acting was indifferent, and the direction was awful, everything was awful. I mean, he really was vicious about the whole thing. And the very last line said, however, this is the only notice I can really remember, except 2 other bad ones. However, in a wretched part, Master Richard Burton, you know, in England they call little boys master, which offended me deeply to be called master. Master Richard Burton showed remarkable ability. And I thought, what's he mean? Remarkable ability, all I do is serve drinks. And I speak about Jekyll and Hyde, and rather lamely at that. And that's when the bug hit, I think. Because I kept on thinking, what does he mean? And I'm still saying, what did he mean?